Hello, everyone. Welcome on into a Wednesday edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. I want to thank you guys all for joining me here on this hump day. And once again, we're always brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just want to thank you guys once again for joining us. We will be having a good show today. We're going to be covering a number of different topics. We're going to start off with a little bit of a Browns outlook, best worst case scenario for them in this upcoming season. And then also we've got some college football to talk about. It's going to be a pretty preview heavy episode as we talk about college football and NFL in terms of previews for certain teams. So make sure you stick around for later in the show. I'm going to be giving you my season preview for Notre Dame as well. That's going to be the last segment of the show. And before we start, I would like to ask you guys that if you want to ask a question or just leave a comment, I definitely would appreciate it. And excuse me, sorry. And if you have a question during the show, we want to hear it because your input is a big part of why our show is successful. And anything that you guys have to say is always appreciated. So whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion that you just have to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every bit of your support. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button, and let's keep this show interactive and exciting. And if you prefer, you can also go to the website, gsmcsports.net, to tip, donate, and leave a question or a comment there. We couldn't do what we do without you guys' amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. So once again, that website is gsmcsports.net if you want to tip, donate, or leave a question and a comment there. So let's go ahead and get into our first segment of the show. We're going to be covering some Cleveland Browns talk. And now Cleveland Browns, of course, have been in the midst of that mess with the Deshaun Watson contract. They've been kind of in that mess for several years at this point. And right now they sit with the second pick in the NFL draft, and there's a lot of questions as to what they might do with that pick. There's some people that are thinking that maybe they go Travis Hunter, and there's also others that think that they might go either Shedeur Sanders or, of course, Abdul Carter. And Abdul Carter has been the one that's been leaked to them the most out of anybody. But, of course, there's still issues and concerns in regards to his health because he has been dealing with some issues during the offseason and right after the Penn State season ended, of course. But just some things for the Browns. They still have a lot of talent on that defense, so they can always hang their hat on that. They signed Myles Garrett to his massive deal in the offseason, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And they, like I said, have an interesting decision on their hands when it comes to their draft. They've got a number of different guys that they could go to maybe shore up offensive, positions. And it also is going to depend on what happens with the rumors surrounding the quarterback situation. There's talk that there's a possibility that Kirk Cousins could come there, but they've got to deal with the contract and the dead cap hit and all of that. If they could work that out and get Kirk Cousins in town, then they could end up having a pretty decent season, if they're able to, nail this draft like they hope they can. And in terms of the draft, Travis Hunter being the Heisman Trophy winner is, a very electric player. And many NFL executives around the league do believe that Hunter is going to end up going to the Browns with that second overall pick. And the other thing, though, that the Browns are going to have to really answer is that quarterback position, though, because last year they threw the most interceptions in the NFL with 23 in a combination of several different quarterbacks, whether it be Jameis Winston or earlier on with Deshaun Watson before he went down with his Achilles injury. And they also intercepted the fewest passes defensively, only 4 interceptions last year, so they need to improve upon that as well. And they were the first team in 69 years to rank dead last in the NFL in interceptions on both offense and defense. First time that's happened since actually the 1955 Steelers did that way back when. And that was obviously before the steel curtain and all of that, so that was some dark days in the Steelers history right there. But QB, like I said, that's the number one question for the Browns right now. That's what needs to be addressed most. The issue with quarterback in this particular class is it's not a super deep class. Cam Ward is the best prospect, and he looks to probably be gone to the Titans with the number 1 pick. So they could go Shedeur Sanders, although a lot of people are thinking Shedeur Sanders is not worth that high of a pick. So you don't know if they're going to actually do that, or maybe they go in a different direction entirely and go get somebody through a trade or, something like that. Because the other thing, too, is when Myles Garrett signed his contract, before that he was, talking throughout all of the media saying that his issue is that he wants to go to a team that can compete for a Super Bowl because he wants to win a championship, and it's not about the money and yada, yada, yada. But then he gets his massive contract with the Browns, and the Browns don't have a quarterback right now. So it's kind of strange that you want to win championships, but you sign or re-sign with a team that still doesn't have the quarterback position worked out, unless the front office told Myles Garrett in that press or in that meeting with him trying to work out that contract that they guaranteed a certain person as far as quarterback is concerned that maybe enticed him to want to stay. But we just don't know those answers just yet. So only time will tell, I guess, if it's Kirk Cousins or if it's somebody in the draft that they're planning on bringing in. But we'll see. The issue with Cousins in a trade is that they don't want to take on all of that money. So there is a possibility that Cousins could be cut because Cousins also doesn't have a trade clause, or he doesn't have a trade clause in his contract, has a no trade clause. So he wouldn't be able to be traded unless he was to waive that, which I think he would be willing to do given the situation in Atlanta. And I know we've talked about that a little bit. But the Browns, they've added one quarterback to the position room with the trade for Kenny Pickett in exchange for DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It was just a straight swap from them and the Eagles. So Kenny Pickett is in the building now. He's not really a starting caliber quarterback. So they still need something there. They need an answer there. But it could be possible that Kenny Pickett could end up being the day one starter for Cleveland if they don't go and get a quarterback in the draft or trade for one before the training camp starts. So they could be running with Kenny Pickett for all we know. But if they do, then, that's potential for a pretty long season if they do that. But in the running back room, they need to upgrade that position too, since Nick Chubb has been, most likely not going to be re-signed. He's an unrestricted free agent, so he's technically not on the roster right now. So they only have Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong Jr. as their running backs in the running back room now. So they need to upgrade that position as well. Luckily for them, it's a very deep running back class in this draft. So, if you take a look at just overall best case scenario for the Browns is they get a quarterback, they get their quarterback situation handled at least for now, and then they squeak into the playoffs with maybe a 9 or 10 win season. And I don't think they go much further than that if that happens. Worst case scenario is they don't figure out the quarterback position, they draft poorly, and then they are stuck in the same sort of routine that we've seen Cleveland be stuck in over the past several years, and just not been able to really break through as they struggle to get a quarterback, handled, or a quarterback actually signed and, dedicated to playing for the Browns. That's kind of been an issue ever since, as long as I can remember, really. But, Baker Mayfield was there and actually took him to a playoff game and led him to a playoff win. But, they decided to go, a different direction and went with Deshaun Watson. And then we've kind of seen how that's worked out over the past few years. So they need to get that position right. Otherwise, it's going to be the same old story in Cleveland. And it's really a shame because they're wasting a pretty good defense and a solid coaching staff for the most part by not, shoring up this quarterback position. So if they can do that this offseason at some point, then maybe they can actually compete in the AFC North a little bit because, we know the Steelers are probably going to be down in terms of having a down year, I would think anyway. The Bengals should be better than they were last year, and the Ravens are, still the Ravens. So it's going to be a tough division no matter what. But the Browns have the possibility of being at least better than they were last year, which I know isn't saying much because they're the number 2 overall pick this year. So obviously they didn't have a great season, but they have a possibility to be a little scrappy if they can get the quarterback position right. On their offensive line, they need some replacements as well. They did add some key players to that line, Cornelius Lucas, Tevin Jenkins, to bolster that unit. One that dealt with multiple injuries during the 2024 season, but with a mainly healthy group that they have now with right guard Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, Ethan Pochik, and Zach Zinter, as well as the return of Joe Bitonio for this coming season, the offensive line should be at least a little bit improved. Now, they're still waiting on the return of DeJuan Jones, the tackle, but he's still recovering from injury, so we don't know if he's going to be ready by the time the season rolls around or how much time he might miss with that injury. On the defensive side of the ball, Cleveland re-signed Devin Bush, the inside linebacker, and also signed Jerome Baker to bolster that position, and they wait for the return of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who sustained a neck injury late last season. So whether or not he's going to miss any time this upcoming season remains to be seen. Cornerback room is running it back from the 2024 season. Tony Brown II re-signed in free agency. And, of course, the room is led by 4-time Pro Bowler Denzel Ward and also Greg Newsome II, as well as some young players like Cameron Mitchell, Martin Emerson Jr., and Miles Harden, who also found their roles respectively in the secondary. Now, they did lose Juan Thornhill to the rival Steelers in the AFC North, so they'll need to of course, try and replace him, but he wasn't really, a every down starter. He was more of a depth piece, but still a solid guy. So that's still somebody they're going to have to replace. And safety is going to look a little bit different for the Browns this year with the retirement of Rodney McLeod. Grant Delpit is that veteran presence that's in that room right now with Ronnie Hickman and Chris Edmonds as the young players in the group. There could be room to add an additional safety to the unit if they want to go ahead and do that in the draft, or if they maybe want to go get somebody like Justin Simmons, who's still out there and still says that he's waiting for the right opportunity, but maybe the Browns could be the right opportunity for him. I mean, they're well coached defensively under Jim Schwartz, so they'd be able to get a good amount out of him if he was to sign there. Plus, he's still a quality safety anyway. But the issue with the Browns is the cap space, and they would have to do something to work that out, of course, because of the whole cap mess that they've been in with the Deshaun Watson contract. So, but yeah, that's what I have for the Browns. Worst case scenario, like I said, they struggle with the draft and they don't find the guy to lead the team offensively, and they end up having another 3-win season or something like that. So best case scenario is everything works out and they get their quarterback. First and foremost, it's going to start with getting their quarterback, and that's going to determine whether or not they're going to be successful or not this year. So that's what I have for the Browns. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Bengals to completely complete. Yeah, that's a great phrase. But to finish up the AFC North that we've talked about on this segment. So stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Before we get into our second segment of the day, when we're going to be covering the Bengals here, I just want to remind you guys that if you have any questions or comments, definitely hit us up in the super chat, gsmcsports.net. If you want to tip, donate, just leave a question or a comment there. Always welcome with all of you guys' support. So definitely do that if you want to and get involved in the show. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of the show here. And again, we're going to be talking best and worst case scenario. This time we're going to be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously, the Bengals did not have the season that they wanted to have. They're going to be going into the draft with the 17th overall pick. They did just re-sign T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to massive deals in the past couple of weeks here. So that keeps that trio of Burrow, Chase, and Higgins all together for the foreseeable future. So their window is still open offensively anyway. And the issue with the Cincinnati Bengals has been their defense, at least last year anyway. The past 2 seasons, though, have been extremely disappointing for the Bengals. After they made it to a Super Bowl and an AFC Championship game in back-to-back seasons, they've now missed the playoffs the past 2 seasons. So definitely disappointing in that regard. And part of the problem is they continue to have slow starts to the season and get in holes, whether it's 1-4, 0-3, whatever the case, and they're fighting and clawing their way back throughout the course of the season. And these past 2 years, they have been unable to get past that record, and they, have missed the playoffs those past 2 years. Last year was especially heartbreaking if you're a Bengals fan, because Joe Burrow put up MVP-level numbers, leading the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and Jamar Chase could have really, if it was a different kind of award, if MVP was not a quarterback award, Jamar Chase might have won MVP himself, because he won the Triple Crown, which was just basically leading the NFL in every category in the receiving department, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and then, of course, receptions. So he was fantastic, and still T. Higgins was great, too. He didn't have the numbers that Jamar Chase did, but nobody else had those numbers either. But he's still very, very good, and there's a reason why they wanted to lock both of those guys down, not just Jamar Chase. But like I said, the offense is not the issue. It's the defense. The defense was the problem last year. They have fired their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, and although I don't necessarily agree with that firing, because I think a lot of it had to do with personnel as far as why they just weren't very good last year. Had a lot of guys with not much experience and just a lot of guys that just weren't very good overall. But he, was the scapegoat in that regard. But with his firing, that's going to pretty much put the whole hot seat completely on Zach Taylor, because now there's no real scapegoat at this point. You've gotten rid of the guy that you could use as a scapegoat, but at this point, Zach Taylor needs to be concerned if they come out and they start the same way they've been starting the past couple of years, coming out with maybe a 1 or 2 bad losses, and then you get into a hole early in the year. If that happens again, then Zach Taylor's his hot seat is going to basically be on fire at that point, and it would not surprise me if they missed the playoffs this coming year that you could see Zach Taylor get fired in Cincinnati. I absolutely believe that he's coaching for his job at this point. You can't have an offense like that and then miss the playoffs in the past 2 years and still keep your job. It's not going to happen. I mean, this isn't the Steelers, who never fire their head coaches. This is a different franchise, that is used to, turning over into new head coaches. So he could be on the hot seat. I think he's definitely on the hot seat this year and could be out if they have another bad year this coming season. Now, on the personnel side of the ball, just some of their departures. They lost their right tackle, Trent Brown, as well as right guard, Alex Kappa. They lost basically their entire right side of that offensive line in the offseason. Now, the offensive line was kind of an issue last year as well, but this doesn't do any favors for them by losing more people on that line. Now, you would think they're probably going to rebuild from the draft, of course, and they most likely will, maybe in the later rounds, or maybe they do it in the first round. Who knows? They don't need any offensive skill players, but they do need to shore up that defense. So maybe they go and get a defensive tackle, because they've lost a couple guys. Sam Hubbard, he's a defensive end who retired this offseason. Sheldon Rankins, the defensive tackle, he is also gone since the Bengals had released him, since he had a disappointing year last year. So that position right there could be a huge need for the Bengals, and they could end up drafting a guy. It's a pretty deep defensive line class, so this would be a good year to do it if you're going to do it. And the 17th overall pick, there should still be some guys out there that you can get that should be quality starters, if all projections are correct, of course. Some other potential departures, just in the sense that they have not been signed elsewhere yet, but they are free agents, and that's Mike Hilton, the corner, Von Bell as well at safety. Neither one of those guys have been signed anywhere yet, but it doesn't look likely that they're going to be back in Cincinnati next year. So you got to figure that's probably more departures, and that's more holes in the secondary that you need to fill. But like I said, when you go into team needs, we mentioned before defensive line, they were bottom in the NFL last year in terms of defensive rush last season. They need to bring in some strong interior defensive linemen to play with B.J. Hill in the run game, to assist in that run defense. Their secondary needs some improvement as well. The Bengals really struggled to stop the run last season, but they weren't great against the pass either. So they definitely need to upgrade that position. If you take a look at some potential draft picks that they could have this year, when looking at the big picture, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss would make a lot of sense if he's available when they pick at 17. Big defensive tackle, could be the perfect fit for the Bengals, and he would be a great pairing with Hill on the interior defensive line. And don't forget about Trey Hendrickson, too. He has yet to be signed to a new deal. He's still technically currently under contract, but he did request a trade early in the offseason, thinking that no deal was going to get done. But then the deals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins got done, and they reopened negotiations with Trey Hendrickson since then. But no movement has really been made on that in terms of a deal. We haven't heard any news about that. You would like to think that the Bengals would like to keep Trey Hendrickson, but if they don't, that's going to be another hole that they're going to need to fill, because he is a great defensive end, and he, of course, led the league in sacks last year as well. 17 sacks in back-to-back seasons, which were both career highs. So there's been some issues with the contract right now. It's not really where he wants it to be, and Bengals front office are saying that it's not really, they're essentially saying it's his problem if he doesn't like the deal. So it's not really looking great for them. But moving on to some other pieces that they might need to address in the draft. Safety, because like I said, Von Bell is going to be gone now. So Malachi Starks out of Georgia would be an interesting get for the Bengals. He would be ideal to add to that Bengals secondary. I mean, there's question marks around Starks' athleticism, which could see him drop down some big boards, so he could be available. However, his college production and football IQ are definitely unquestioned. Starks was a leader and a national champion at Georgia, and he can play multiple positions as well. Get some refinement on his coverage techniques, and he could end up being that superstar that the Bengals need on that side of the ball. But a lot of upside in that guy, so wouldn't be surprised if he's available if they go ahead and get him. Now, depending on what happens with Trey Hendrickson, that'll depend on whether or not they go edge rusher in the draft. If they decide to do that, then Mike Green would be a good fit out of Marshall. If they opt for a pass rusher, he could be the perfect man for that job. He led college football last year with 17 sacks last season, and his production levels are, definitely unquestioned. He is one of the best edge rushers in the draft, in a talented edge rush class, of course. So that's basically everything that they need. Now, best case scenario for the Bengals is they shore up the defense. The defense is much better this year because the offense is already there. So if the defense can get better and be better than they were last year, this will be a playoff team, I believe. So best case scenario, the Bengals are right back in the conversation for competing in the AFC, because with that offense that they have, if they have even a decent defense, that's going to be a team to be reckoned with during the course of the season, and then leading into the playoffs. They're going to be very hard to beat. And they've already proven that they could beat Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead and beat Kansas City, if they need to. So, and also they have proven that they could beat Buffalo as well. They did that in their Super Bowl run, when they got to the Super Bowl and ultimately lost to the Rams. So they have that same type of offense, hasn't been much changed since those couple of years ago that it was. So they've proven that they can do it against these top tier teams. And of course, they play Baltimore very closely because that's an in-division rivalry game. So they can hang with Baltimore for sure. And they, even last year when they had both games were very, very close down to the wire games, the Bengals had a terrible defense, but still were hanging in that game. So you have to figure if they had any kind of defense at all, they probably win one, if not both of those games. And then they're in the playoffs instead of watching from home. So it's going to really depend on how they show up. A worst case scenario for the Bengals is they start slow again, and then they end up in a hole that they're going to have to try and fight out of in a tough AFC, in a tough AFC North division. Then that'll just put them in a hole, and then it'll just be like, okay, here we go again amongst everybody in Cincinnati. So that's not the kind of mindset that you want going into your season, or as going into later in your season as well. You want to start strong instead of consistently getting yourself in a hole to where you have to climb out and, fight your way into the playoffs at the end of the year. And that's, a risky game because things not necessarily can always go your way. You could have to rely on other teams to lose or other teams to beat certain teams, and that's, not where you want to be. You don't want to rely on other teams to help you get into the playoffs. You want to be able to control your own destiny, and that's really what the Bengals are going to need to do this year. They can't be starting slow like they have been, otherwise there's going to be some changes throughout the course of the year in terms of coaching staff, and then who knows what that could end up leading to. Could end up leading to a high draft pick for them if it all just goes, really, really badly. But, if everything goes well, this Bengals team, I think, is absolutely capable of competing in a tough AFC in the playoffs because nobody's going to want to play that offense with as good as they can be. So, so that's basically best worst case scenario for the Bengals. When we come back, we're going to dive into some college football for the rest of the show. We've got 3 season previews coming along here, and our College Corner segment is going to be taking up 3 different segments today. So got a lot of college football to cover. We're going to start off with Alabama, and then we're going to go to Clemson before ultimately making our final stop at Notre Dame in terms of looking at their season preview and what they could be looking at this coming college football season. So stick with us. We're going to be right back. I'm going to take another break here, and then we're going to talk some college football. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, welcome on back to the show. We're going to go right into our College Corner segment here, and we're going to talk about Alabama Crimson Tide. And, excuse me, so taking a look at Alabama, last year they had, by their standards, something of a middling sort of season, kind of an average season, not anything super, super exciting going on for Alabama last year. They're looking to hopefully regroup this coming season. They've got a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and a whole new identity, really, coming into this coming season. So quarterback is the intrigue that's going to rule the storylines from just about any team, but especially Alabama right now. The veteran backup is impressing people right now with his running ability in Ty Simpson. He's looking to be most likely the starter going forward, but they do have other guys on the roster that are going to be competing. The 6'6" West Coast transfer with a big arm in Austin Mack, or the 5-star all-everything freshman Keelan Russell. All of those guys are all going to be competing in some vein. Now, Ty Simpson, like I said, is looking to potentially be the quarterback one, but Mack and Russell are most likely going to be competing for that backup spot. So we'll have to see how that shakes out for Alabama. But when you go down further on down the roster, take a look at some of their running backs. They've got returning starter Jam Miller. He's coming back for his senior season after a somewhat disappointing year as the starter last year. It was his first year as a starter for Alabama. They've got some returning depth in Richard Young, Daniel Hill, and Kevin Riley. And they've got a couple of new players in Dre Washington and A.K. Deere as well. So Alabama struggled really last year. They struggled with the running the ball. They struggled really to even call running plays for actual running backs for much of the season. So there's hope that they can have a more coherent rushing scheme with the new offensive coordinator now. Since last year, they were fourth last in rushing attempts last year in all of college football. So they're hoping to be much better this year in that regard with the new offensive coordinator coming in and, hopefully having a more creative sort of playbook, and they can maybe have some more of a two-dimensional sort of offense instead of just a one-dimensional sort of offense where they were trying to just basically let Jalen Milroe do whatever he could to make plays, last year. So for the most part, he did, but, Alabama still were not what they normally are last year. So past that, though, Richard Young was the number 3 back for Alabama last season and flashed quite a few nice runs. So he's expected to be the number 2 guy behind Miller. At tight end, Danny Lewis is out for the spring with injury, so that's giving freshman Caleb Edwards, who is not enrolling until summer, actually, and then the tight end position group is severely short on depth because of both of those guys. But Josh Cuevas was the number 3 tight end for the Tide last season, and he was also the 4th leading receiver last year, so he's most likely going to be the leader of that tight end group, at least at the start anyway. Lewis should be the other starting tight end based on his 4 years as a backup when he does finally enroll and get into the squad and everything. So he's missed some spring ball, though, so the door is open for others to compete. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. At wide receiver, this is Alabama's most stacked position group overall. Bernard and Williams both return as the Tide's 2 best players on offense in 2024. So they're returning this year, so that's definitely going to be a plus for them. And now they bring another year of experience with a known offensive coordinator that's known for creating some volume passing games as well. Then there's Jalen Hale and Cole Adams, both returning from injury. Hale was a part-time starter for the Tide as a freshman last year and for the Tide in 2023 before missing all of last season with an injury. Meanwhile, Adams was carving out a pretty good role and getting quite a bit of playing time last season before missing the second half of the season. Both are starting caliber pass catchers, so definitely guys to look out for. As far as some new guys that have come in, Isaiah Horton was a huge transfer portal win for Alabama. Big-bodied veteran receiver, brings 56 catches, 616 yards to his from his season in Miami when he was catching passes from Cam Ward. Brings that to the group and is expected to be the 3rd starter alongside Bernard and Williams. Oh, and also, don't forget about Jalen Mbakwe as well. He's a former top 10 prospect, and he's got Olympic-level fast track speed who can play defensive back. He played defensive back as a freshman last year, but he's actually switching over to wide receiver this year. So by most metrics, Alabama had a top 10 defense in the country as well. Speaking of defense, with the defensive back there. So last season, in Kane Womack's first season as the defensive coordinator, they did have a top 10 defense in the country. So Alabama typically always does have a very good defense. So that's not super, surprising. But the 3 starters on the defensive line in Womack's 3-3-5 scheme, they're pretty well entrenched at this point. Left tackle Overton returned for his senior season, and he will start defensive tackle. I said left tackle, defensive tackle. Tim Keenan returned for his 5th year and will start at nose tackle. Rising junior James Smith really came on over the second half of his sophomore season, and he's likely going to start at defensive tackle for Alabama. And Alabama should have pretty good quality depth, if nothing else. The Crimson Tide also added Florida transfer Kelby Collins out of the portal, so he should provide some pretty good snaps overall right away. So Alabama as a whole, they've got some work to do as they're still trying to rebuild this team from, of course, the glory days when Nick Saban was running the show and they had all-star players basically every single season. Now it's a little bit different. Now with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach going into his second season as a head coach of Alabama, there's going to be a little bit more expectations on him, but they've got a whole new quarterback room, so that's going to be the big question really, is if they can get production out of those guys. Some of the guys that are coming back also want to get some additional playing time and experience from those guys, but it's those young guys and the transfers that you want to get as much development out of and get some good quality production out of all of those guys. So whether it's Ty Simpson or any of those other backups, it looks to be Ty Simpson right now as we stand in spring ball. But that could change depending on how the rest of spring goes and, how the early season goes. It could end up being either Austin Mack or the freshman Keelan Russell. If he shows out in spring, then it's very possible that he could end up being the number one guy, or at least could get some playing time as the season goes along. But as of right now, it's still supposed to be Ty Simpson. So we'll see how that goes along. And, with Jam Miller as well, he returns for his senior season. Like I said, he was a decent back, but I think he's going to have a lot better of a job to have this year because of his having the new offensive coordinator and everything is definitely going to be a plus for Alabama. So I apologize. I'm getting over a cold here. So I apologize if I don't sound great. But so overall, I think Alabama, they're going to be not too much different than what they were last year, in my opinion. I think Alabama could get maybe 8 or 9 wins this coming season. It's a pretty tough SEC. They, of course, have a tough schedule overall. So I could see Alabama squeezing out maybe 9, maybe 10 wins. And, they're always going to be in that conversation, most likely, when people are talking about playoffs and things like that. They may not be the powerhouse that they used to be back when they had Saban and all that, but they're still, competitive every single year. They're still in that conversation. They're still Alabama, really, so you got to give them credit, and you can't really count them out because they're always, producing quality talent at the NFL level as well. So, definitely a team to watch out for overall. So that's what I have for Alabama going forward. So we're going to continue this series after this break here. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Clemson a little bit, see what I think that Clemson might end up doing. Now, they actually have a pretty stacked roster with a star quarterback and everything, so it's going to be interesting to see how they roll out the season as well. They've got another tough schedule, too, playing in the ACC. They won the ACC last year, so we'll have to see how they bounce back or how they continue that and improve upon that this coming season. So stick around. We're going to get more into detail about Clemson, so we'll be right back right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, guys, welcome on back to the show. We're going to get right into our continued series here, our College Corner, and we're going to be talking about Clemson in this segment here. Now, Clemson getting to the playoffs last year, of course, was a big achievement for them. They hadn't had really any kind of success in the past few years trying to rebuild that team under Dabo Swinney, but their football program has gotten plenty of love lately in the early preseason rankings. For this coming season. A lot of people touting the Tigers as a top 10 team entering this coming season. Like I said before, they won the ACC last fall and returned to the college football playoff without anywhere near one of its better teams that have been under Dabo Swinney. So they were able to overachieve for the most part. last season. So they're hoping to build on that, and they have a star quarterback that it all starts with, and that's Cade Klubnik. He's one of the nation's most experienced quarterbacks that's going to be there in Death Valley for them. He's going to operate under coordinator Garrett Riley for the third straight year, so there's continuity there, a lot of familiarity, so there shouldn't be any kind of drop-off in terms of play there because they're all familiar with each other. So that offense should be a lot better and more improved this coming season. Defensive line and wide receiver, two positions where Clemson has historically thrived under Dabo Swinney, are once again projected to be strengths on this team. New defensive coordinator they have now with Tom Allen. He comes over from Penn State and inherits a group of linemen in 2025 that should help return Clemson's defense to one of the nation's best units overall. Clemson typically does have a very good defense, and they also, like I said, just also usually have very talented wide receivers. There's a list of wide receivers that have come from Clemson, especially in recent years. Guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Martavis Bryant. Those guys, even though Bryant kind of faded there with some off the field issues, there was no denying the talent that he had and that he possessed. And of course, DeAndre Hopkins, speaks for himself. All-world receiver, getting on the back end of his career now, but in his prime, he was fantastic, and coming from Clemson too. So they have a history of, developing really good wide receivers. Also, Hunter Renfrow too came from Clemson as well. So that's another scrappy player in the NFL who's usually pretty solid and decent player. So they're used to having these talented guys on offense, and it's going to be no different again this coming season. So defensive end, like I said, on defense, should be a pretty solid unit. Defensive end TJ Parker and defensive tackle Peter Woods, are both future pros. I'm sure they will be in the NFL draft relatively soon. As for Parker, he had 19.5 tackles for loss last year and 6 forced fumbles. And Woods stands at 6'3", 315 pounds. He's shown flashes of dominance, but look for him to have an even more breakout season this coming season in Allen's very aggressive attacking defensive scheme that he has. So with that, Woods should get a lot more opportunities now that he's got a little bit more experience under his belt as well. The key offseason acquisition was Purdue transfer Will Helt at defensive end. He had 16 quarterback pressures a year ago and he will team with Parker to give Clemson that dynamic pass rushing combo that they want. And a redshirt sophomore tackle, Stephen Green, had his best football ahead of him, most likely, and getting back sixth-year senior tackle DeMonte Capehart was great for the Tigers as well, especially if he can stay healthy. A lot of eyes will be on him, as well as a lot of eyes on the 5-star freshman Amari Adams. So all of those guys should come in and be able to help out and be effective for Clemson. After winning their 8th ACC title in the last 10 years last year, making their 7th college football playoff appearance, Clemson 10-4 last year in 2024. They're going to open the season next year with a marquee matchup against LSU at Memorial Stadium. That's going to be Saturday, August 30th. It's going to be a lot of good games on August 30th, actually. Texas plays Ohio State on that game as well, or on that day as well. So that's going to be another one that's going to be fun to watch. Their schedule overall, once again featuring a full 7-game home slate in Death Valley. Games against LSU, Troy, Syracuse, SMU, Duke, Florida State, and then Furman. Then, of course, you got a few teams in there that should be, tune-up games, essentially. But there's a couple of sneaky games in there. LSU, of course, is a tough one. Florida State is always tough. Even Duke sometimes can be scrappy. Now, I mean, they are not going to be blowing anybody away or anything like that, but, they've matched up well against some teams here and there. But Clemson, on paper, should be able to take care of all of those teams, really. LSU is probably going to be the toughest game that they have on their home schedule. And that happens to come at the very first game of the year. So they somehow find a way to get through that game, and they could be looking at a much better record this coming season, maybe 11 wins, possibly 12 wins, depending on how everything goes, of course. But On the road, they have Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Boston College, and Louisville. And then the big game that they have is their regular season finale, and that's at South Carolina. Now, we've talked about South Carolina a few times on this show in the past, and what I am really liking about that South Carolina team is that defense. Their defense was good last year, of course, but this year it's supposed to be even more improved with a lot of experience on that defensive side of the ball, a lot of explosive playmakers as well. So that's going to be a tough game for Clemson to get through, but it's a rivalry game, so those games are always tricky anyway. This should be Dabo Swinney's best team since his last national title, which was a few years ago in 2019, I believe it was. But their strengths on offense are Cade Klubnik, like I said, the return of him, who has made the significant progress under Garrett Riley, and he's a major boost for that offense. The offensive line is expected to be mostly intact from last year. They should provide a pretty strong foundation for the running game as well as protecting Cade Klubnik as the season goes along. Wide receivers, as we mentioned before, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, and Antonio Williams. That's a pretty strong class that they have, or pretty strong room, I should say, in that regard. So defensive improvements, like I said before, the new defensive coordinator coming in, Tom Allen, new DC, and he's expected to bring improvements to that defense. The defensive line, a historical strength, as we said before, is projected to be a strength once again with players like we mentioned, TJ Parker. That run defense, they struggled against the run a little bit last year, but they're looking to hopefully improve in that area as the season goes along. And we mentioned their schedule. They have a pretty tough schedule, although they are expected to be the favorite in the ACC, and they're projected to be a playoff contender this coming season. They made the playoffs last year with arguably a lesser team than they'll have this year. So the thought is that they're probably going to be in the mix for possibly even a national championship. If they can get into the playoffs, anything can happen, so we'll see. But like I said, it's a challenging schedule, so those home games are going to be testing, especially with those interconference ones and then the LSU game. So also, those road trips to Georgia Tech and Louisville will be tricky as well. But on paper, they have a better team than all of those teams, so they should be able to get the job done. LSU, kind of a toss-up because LSU's got a pretty good squad too, and they're returning some high-quality talent as well on the offensive side of the ball. But Clemson's receiving pretty high praise in the early preseason rankings. Some analysts are predicting them to be a top 10 team, and other analysts are predicting them to be a possible national championship contender. So a lot of good positivity coming out of Clemson camp right now. The biggest game outside of the LSU game is that South Carolina game, so that's really going to kind of tell the tale of their season, and it ends their season essentially, so wherever they are record-wise, we'll see. But that South Carolina game is going to be tough. So overall, Clemson is poised to be a pretty strong team. They should have a strong season, talented roster, new defensive coordinator, but they have a challenging schedule. So if they can get over the challenging schedule with that talent, they should be a top 10 team, and I believe they should be a serious contender in the college football playoffs. So we'll see, in a couple of months when we get some, August football, some college football, and we'll find out if Clemson is really going to be a dominant team, or at least, be a serious, legitimate contender. We'll find out in the first week of college football against LSU, that tough matchup. So we'll see what happens there. But that's what I have for Clemson. I think a 10-win season, maybe 11 wins, is a possibility for them. I think they get into the playoffs, and I think they win a couple games, and they potentially challenge for a national championship. That's what how highly I think of Clemson this coming season. So we'll see if that turns out to be true. We're going to come right back. We have one more segment about college in the College Corner, and this one is Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. Of course, they got to the national championship game last year and lost to Ohio State. So we're going to talk about how they can maybe overcome that hump and maybe possibly win a national championship this coming season. So stick with us. We're going to take one final break, and then when we come back, we'll have our final segment. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome on back to the final segment on this Wednesday Hump Day edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. Hope you guys have enjoyed it as to this point. We've got, like I said, one more segment here, and we're going to cover it. College Corner, we're going to cover the Notre Dame Fighting Irish outlook. Last year, of course, they got to the national championship game against Ohio State and were unable to win the title as Ohio State dominated a good majority of that game before Notre Dame tried to make a little bit of a late push, but ultimately were unable to overcome Ohio State, and they lost that game. But for the 2025 season, led by Coach Marcus Freeman, who is returning, of course, they're expected to be a strong contender. Challenging schedule featuring multiple power conference teams that they'll have to play, and they have a season opener against Miami, so that's going to be a tough game as well. Miami, of course, have a new quarterback situation going on with Carson Beck there to transfer from Georgia, so Cam Ward is out now with being in the NFL draft, most likely going to the Titans, so Miami will have to deal with that as well. But Carson Beck was a solid quarterback at Georgia, so it's going to be a tough game for Notre Dame for sure. But they kick off that game on August 31st. That's on the road against Miami. Schedule-wise, their conference opponents, the Irish will face teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 games each from each of those conferences, and also 6 games against the ACC as well. And a couple other notable games. They also played Boise State and Navy, as is tradition with that schedule. So some rivalry games, just going through their schedule here a little bit. Rivalry games they play Purdue, USC, Boston College, Navy, and Stanford, all rivalry games with rivalry trophies, actually. First-time opponents, they've actually never played Arkansas and have never played Boise State, so they're going to play both of those teams. They travel to Arkansas, so that'll be a first for them, and they host Boise State, so they won't be playing on that blue field. So all 5 of their away games come against Power 4 opponents as well. So they've got a challenging schedule. They're going to have to get through that. The SEC and Big Ten, 2 of the best conferences in college football. They have a total of 4 games if you combine both of those conferences. So that's going to be a good chunk of their season. So if they can get out of those games, relatively unscathed, then they could be in the conversation for a potential college football playoff representation. So offensively, when we just take a look at some of their personnel here on the depth chart, is expected to feature Jeremiah Love at running back, and Jadarian Price is supposedly going to be the backup as well. For Price's part, he recorded 746 yards on 120 carries last year to go along with his 7 rushing touchdowns. As a sophomore, he had a 6.2 yards per carry average, so pretty solid, despite those numbers not being over 1,000 yards or anything like that. That's still pretty good yards per carry average. And that's a dynamic running back tandem, but perhaps not dynamic enough to hold off the true sophomore Aeneas Williams. He is a talented running back as well, but Love still managed to record, Jeremiah Love, that is, still managed to record 1,125 yards on 163 carries. So that was almost 2,000 yards of rushing between those 2 guys. So definitely productive on the running side of the ball. He had 6.9 yards per carry, too, so he was even better than Jadarian Price. 17 rushing touchdowns as a true sophomore as well. Definitely impressive for Jeremiah Love. So he's going to be taking the reins there and returning to be the starting running back there. So focusing on some depth for Notre Dame, they're expected to have a strong depth chart with several players expected to step into some bigger roles. They do have some playoff ambitions. A lot of people expect Notre Dame to be back in the college football playoff this coming season, fielding some predicting saying about 10 wins overall as a minimum for Notre Dame. So a lot of positivity and hype for Notre Dame as well. The schedule is challenging, though, like I've mentioned before. 4 teams that they're playing won at least 10 games last season, and 9 qualified for the postseason as well. So they have some coaching changes as well, though. Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, Al Golden, is expected to move to the NFL, and Mike Mickens is a potential successor as of right now. Their recruiting class is a decent recruiting class, excuse me. Their 2025 class ranks 12th overall nationally. So decent, not top 10, not top 5 or anything like that, but still a solid recruiting class overall. So CJ Carr is expected to be the projected starter at quarterback. So obviously they do not have their previous quarterback, so it's a new quarterback room. Notre Dame fans have waited far too long to get a glimpse of a bona fide number one wideout since Chase Claypool back in 2019. Nobody has really come close to that level of production for Notre Dame since Claypool was drafted after the 2019 season. But after 5 seasons of waiting for a new bona fide number one wideout, they might just have that with Jaden Greathouse. Across the Orange Bowl and National Championship games against Penn State and Ohio State, respectively, Greathouse caught 13 total passes for 233 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the production is there for sure. So he could absolutely improve on that and have a very good coming season in 2025. It's going to depend on the quarterback situation. If CJ Carr ends up being a solid quarterback, then like a quarterback that's, Riley Leonard wasn't, anything that's going to jump off the page, but he was solid for Notre Dame and got them to the national championship game. So, definitely quality enough. So if CJ Carr can provide that kind of, stability at the quarterback position, then Notre Dame should be right in the conversation again this coming season. So as far as receivers are concerned, it should be, like I said, Jaden Greathouse, of course, is going to be their number one receiver, of course. So, but there are other guys, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling, fall in the transfer category, arriving by way of Virginia and Wisconsin, respectively. So they are new additions to that wide receiver room. Fields, he caught 129 passes for just under 2,000 yards and 11 touchdowns across 4 seasons when he was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and including 55 receptions for 808 yards and 5 touchdowns last season, despite his quarterback having a 13-11 touchdown to interception ratio. So he's essentially caught half of those touchdown passes that his quarterback threw last year. So as for Pauling, he also has 129 career catches, but spread across 4 seasons as well between Wisconsin and Cincinnati. Last year when he was with Wisconsin with the Badgers, he totaled 42 catches for 407 yards and 3 touchdowns. A little bit of a dip from his junior year totals when he had 74 catches for 837 yards and 6 touchdowns. But it is worth mentioning that part of that dip is most likely kind of coincided with Wisconsin losing their starting quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, for the season, just 3 games into last season. So that dip in production could be attributed to that as well, not having his normal starting quarterback at his disposal. That would hurt any receiver because it is, of course, the receiver's job to catch the ball, but they need a quarterback that's going to be able to get him the ball. So his production dropped a little bit, just simply because of that. But he's still a productive receiver, and he should be better this year in terms of production-wise anyway. So besides the transfer portal additions actually living up to the hype, the Irish need to at least get 2 guys to step up from the group of redshirt sophomore KK Smith and redshirt freshman Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, and Logan Salday. All of those guys, they need to step up for that room, and they need to actually live up to the hype. And then Notre Dame will be right back in there in the conversation. The last 3 guys in that room are Elijah Burris, Jerome Bettis Jr., that is the same Jerome Bettis. So that's his son playing wide receiver, and then, of course, Antavius Richardson. Trio of recruits who each feel just as likely to redshirt this season as he does to crack the top 6 of the rotation. So we shall see what happens with that group. If you hadn't heard it before, Notre Dame also returned just 6 total starts, not 6 total starters, 6 total starts among the offensive linemen that they have that started any kind of game or that started last season's season opener against Texas A&M. 5 offensive linemen with 6 total starts in between them. So that's a lot of youth on that offensive line, a lot of inexperience on that offensive line. So that's going to be a question mark, of course. But the guy that holds the most sway in terms of sorting out out the starting unit is Guerby Lambert. The redshirt freshman was Notre Dame's second highest rated recruit in the 2024 class. So here we're going to have to see, after he redshirted last year, we'll have to see how productive he can be on that offensive line for them. On the interior defensive line, projected starters, Gabriel Rubio and Jared Dawson. Those are the two guys that are probably going to be your guys up front. Rubio became the starter slightly ahead of schedule when he took over towards the end of last year during the college football playoff after Riley Mills suffered a season-ending knee injury against Indiana in that playoff game. So then Rubio was able to come in, and he can build on that experience from playing in the playoffs as well. And behind those two that we mentioned before is Donovan Hinnish, younger brother of Kurt, who is Notre Dame's former record holder for career games played, a record that's now held probably forever back by Jack Kaiser. But the younger Hinnish totaled 35 tackles last year, 5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks as the redshirt sophomore that he was last year. He'll once again play a second string role alongside either Elijah Hughes, an undergrad transfer from USC. Most likely. So Notre Dame's got a lot of questions, but they do have a lot of hype surrounding them as well. So getting to a national championship game last year was definitely a positive step in the right direction. But now coming into this year, they need to get over that final step. It's going to be challenging because they don't have the same quarterback, don't have the same number of players. There's a lot of guys that they lost, but for the most part, they have enough returning players, enough talent, whether it's, through transfer portals or, recruiting classes, whatever the case, 12th ranked transfer portal class. So we'll see what Notre Dame does overall. But I could see them going to the playoffs for sure. I think they are a playoff team. Whether or not they get to the national title game again this coming season, that remains to be seen. I'm not quite ready to give a national title prediction just yet. It's a little early in the game for that, but I could see them actually getting to the playoffs at least, though. So that's my Notre Dame outlook, and that is the final segment of this show. So on this Wednesday, this hump day, we're going to let you guys go now. I hope you guys all enjoyed tuning into the show. Thank you once again for tuning into GSMC Football Podcast. We are, as always, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and more updates. Thank you once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we'll see you guys same time, same place tomorrow night. So have a good one. Talk to you guys soon.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn.